In this video, you're going to be learning exactly why so many bass players find it really hard to make scales sound like real music, real bass lines, real bass fills, and instead it ends up sounding like kind of just fumbling around a bunch of notes and trying to find that something's barely passable. I'm also going to be giving you 3 easy to implement actionable exercises that's going to give you the tools to actually start using scales the right way and ultimately will make you sound like a badass. Hey, it's Scott Devine here from scottsbasslessons.com, helping you take your bass playing to the next level. And on this channel, we focus on one thing and one thing only: bass. We do YouTube tutorials, we talk about gear, we create video essays focused on your favorite bass players and everything in between. So if you are new here, make sure that you give that subscribe button a right good slap in. So the main reason that so many bass players struggle to use scales effectively, i.e. use them to create great bass lines, fills and solos, etc., is that they think a scale is more than it actually is. As in, they've been told to learn the scales, learn the modes, and they are needed, right? But what no one seems to point out is that once you've learned the scales, you are not going to be able to actually use them. I'll say that again so you catch it, okay? Once you've learned the scales, you are not going to be able to actually use them. What the? How does that even make sense? Okay, so stick with me. Now remember when I said that people tend to think a scale is more than it actually is? Think of a scale like this. Music is a language. We've heard a million people say that before, right? Now, scales are the alphabet of that language. Now, with that in mind, if I asked you to learn the Chinese alphabet, would you be able to speak Chinese? No, you wouldn't, would you? Okay, then why, when people learn scales, the alphabet of music, do they seem to think that they'll be able to speak the language of music? Now, before we go any further, let me know in the comments if this makes any kind of crazy sense. And if it does, and you're thinking, hell yeah, I practice my scales, but I just can't make them sound any good, then sleep easy, because it's absolutely not your fault. They have just been sold to you, explained to you in the wrong way. Now, the good news is that scales are awesome if you start approaching them in the right way. So without further ado, let's jump into these actionable exercises so you can take a scale and actually start making music with it. Now, for all of the examples in this lesson, I am going to be using the C major scale, okay? So first of all, let's make sure we can play it. Now that was the C major scale in this area. Obviously we've got a C major scale here, we've got one here as well, and frankly we've got the notes from the C major scale all over the instrument as well. So when you really learn the scale effectively, you can play it all over the instrument, okay, and you're not really confined by patterns, but that is a completely different lesson. Now also bear in mind as well that I've done a download for this. If you want to grab it, the link is in the description. So the first exercise I want to show you today to get a scale and make it actually start sounding like real music, real melodies and bass lines is using sequenced intervals, okay? Sequenced intervals. Now this is when you take a scale and start playing it in intervals instead of a linear line. Now to be clear, a linear line using the C major scale would sound like this. A sequence of intervals, or what I call them sequenced intervals, okay, is when you play a third like this, and then another third, and then another third. So they're more angular, okay? You go do da do da do da da, you know, through the scale. Okay. Now that is sequenced intervals. Now you can play sequenced intervals using thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths and sevenths. And I've actually, as I said earlier, I've gone ahead and created a free downloadable workbook that you can grab via the link below that includes all of these patterns for you in tab and notation. But let me take the time now just to show you what these sound like, just a few of them, okay? So in thirds, if we take the C major scale, we learned that before, okay? We're just going to play in thirds to begin with. Here's what it sounds like. Now once you've learned it in thirds, you can play it in fourths. You could play in fifths, you could play in sixths. Like sixth is my favourite. Just sounds so great. And sevenths and, you know, and the whole deal. But when you get those sequenced intervals and start mixing those with linear lines, that is when real music starts to happen, real phrasing, when the audience can be like, oh, this actually sounds like ideas and not just fumbling around a bunch of notes, which is what so many people do. So let me give you an example of that, okay? And what I'm going to do is, as I play through, and I'm going to use a C major scale, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing as I do it. Now I've got a little electro harmonics freeze pedal down here, so I can actually hold this chord and then do that. No hands, okay? And what I'm going to do, as I say, I'm just going to improvise on top of this using the C major scale and mix the sequenced intervals with linear lines, okay? So I'm going to start off with a linear line, okay? Intervals of thirds. Linear. Arpeggio. Linear line down, 6, that was a fifth there, another linear line going up this time, coming down linear to fourths, fifths, to thirds, linear. So there you could see it was just mixed, and I'm going to 6, to fifths, I snuck in a little sharp 11 there, but shh.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
Shh, don't tell anybody. Now exercise number 2 is running arpeggios within the scale. Now what that means is, if we take a 7-note scale, like a, you know, C major scale for instance, right, you'll find that there are 7 arpeggios contained within that scale. The first arpeggio is C major 7. Next up is D minor 7. E minor 7, and when you start improvising with these, trust me, it's going to sound wicked. F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5, and then we're back at C. So up to speed, that will sound like this. Now another cool thing you can do with these arpeggios contained within the major scale is, instead of just going from the roots up and do 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 da do 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 da do 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 da, instead of doing that you can go okay, so up 1, okay, up the C major, and then descend down the next one from the 7th of the arpeggio, okay? Now, just as I did before, I want to show you what that sounds like mixed up with linear lines, okay, over a little improvisation. So let me put on the freeze pedal. Here we go. So first up, a linear line. Arpeggio. Linear. Up one of the other arpeggios. Linear. Thirds. Arpeggios. Linear line. Linear line. Fourths. Up the arpeggios. So that was a real mix of all of that stuff going on all at the same time. Now I've got one more exercise for you, but before we even get to that, it's time for question of the day. Obviously this lesson is pretty, we're getting into the theory of things. We're talking a lot about improvisation and how to solo and play melodies. What I would love to know from you guys is, do you want to know more about this? Do you want to see more about this kind of stuff on this channel? Like, it's been a long time since I've done a lot of improvisation, soloing type stuff. Is this, something that you'd like to see more of? If it is, give me a hell yeah in the comments. And if you want to go into more detail as well about what you'd like me to cover with improvisation, soloing, and all that type of jazz, or not jazz, if as the case may be, right? If you want to know that, just let me know in the comments. I can go through later and check it and make sure that I can, make my content in alignment with what you guys are looking for. Now, exercise number 3 is more of a mindset rather than a typical exercise. It's thinking of words and phrases, not scales. Now, remember when I said that scales were just the musical alphabet? Well, just as when we were learning to speak a language for the first time when we were kids, to begin with, we just learned random words, mama, dada. And then obviously, as we got older, we started to learn more words, as in started to build up our vocabulary. And then we gained the ability to string those words together to actually form phrases and sentences. Now, that is exactly the process we need to apply to learning any musical instrument, not just the bass. When you hear somebody playing a great line or a great riff or a great lick, it is your responsibility to work out that lick or the riff or the line and replicate it just like you replicated words when you were a kid. If you are listening to something on YouTube, feel free to use that slow down function by hitting the little cog down there on the player.
Use that slow down function.
Because it's not a crime to slow things down. Did your parents slow things down? Did they slow their pronunciation down when they were teaching you to speak? Hell yeah! Of course they did, right? We do the same thing for our kids, right? Now, the key thing here is, while you are learning whatever lick or line it is, you should be looking to tie that back to a scale or an arpeggio or a linear line. Something you need to tie it back, as that gives you the context of why it works and when you can use it. Now, if you enjoyed the content in this video, make sure that you give that like button a real good slapping down below. I've also got 2 more super cool things for you, and both are free. First up is my completely free Bass Players Toolkit that you can grab via the link in the description below. It includes loads of free video resources like my video guide to dialing in the perfect bass tone, exactly how to set up your bass, truss rods and all of that kind of stuff, and also how to, play the modes and really understand what's going on and I demystify the whole thing for you. And there's loads of other cool stuff. So you can grab that from the description below. And secondly, I've also hooked you up with a totally free 14-day trial to scotsbasslessons.com as well, which is the ultimate learning platform for bass players just like you. Scots Bass Lessons has the largest and coolest video course library on the planet and is essentially your chance to study with the best bass players on the planet from the comfort of your own home. Now, the links to both of those things are down in the description below, along with a full workbook as well for this specific lesson with the tab, the notation, and all of the fretboard diagrams and shenanigans like that, okay? So with that said, make sure that you grab the free stuff, take it easy, and I'll see you in the shed.